This is the pulpit. Yes. I was looking for you. Are you planning to learn? No. All these are usually funded right? So and then we done this the event. These are very soon to the event. These are the events. Not with one thing. Then the last thing is that's all we check out. So the last something over. So we're doing section 5. In section 5, where we have, yes, this one now comes right now. Okay. We've just done the interchange. 11 to 1. Yeah. No, not 11 to 1. It should be a now. Yeah. Let's see how it works.
No, 11 to 12. Sorry,
Yeah, we are
11 to
we are
12
trying
now.
to squeeze it in.
No. Whoever is moderating, tell them to speak.
We are starting again. Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, team, for accepting to comply. Thank you. Now, I think we need to move to the next session as we indicated earlier. And just a quick check in the room. I know the next session we have a set of panel. So I don't want to take much time, maybe talking too much about anything, but I want to leave this chance to Madam Teresa Omondi, who will lead us through this next session. And we'll try to keep it at an hour so that we're able to catch up with lost time. Thank you so much. Yes, Teresa, I can see you are done. I leave the floor for you so that we kick it off. Thank you.
I feel like there's some. I'm just feeling like there's so many people outside, and we might be addressing tables. So maybe we give it just 2 minutes. I donate my other 2 minutes, so we get more people on this table.
Madam Speaker, you may appoint me as your chief whip.
Please,
I will whip everyone.
I just hope I can afford your invoice. And meanwhile, I can get help to get this out. It's going to block my speaker here. So we can just move it down, please. Okay. Okay. Because Patricia, okay. Pastel. Can prevent from. Oh, you want to keep us standing? Huh? Okay, here. Now my chief whip has also been taken. Right, calling you. Yes, for a page.
No, okay, sorry.
Thank you. Can carry our copy. Thank you.
Si unajua sana mimi.
No. Sahivi kwa sababu ninaishi from time. After lunch naenda.
Oh, kuna kalamu. Ashaenda. Were you? No, you. I like you. You are late. I mean, for my journal difference.
Thank you. Okay, finally. I also had to go get the chief whip who went out to bring people. So I also had to go bring my chief whip. So we are ready to start our next very exciting panel of very great people, some whom I have met today. Okay, and one has disappeared again. Oh gosh. I'm not very lucky, but it's okay. We will work with what we have. So let's welcome on stage Patricia Nganiri. She's the program manager for Wilsa, and she's going to be our lead presenter today. I've been asking Patricia what she likes, and I know one thing that she likes that she didn't tell me. She's a lovely dancer. So when we finish all this hard work and you want to get someone who can dance with you this evening, look out for Patricia. But you only have to dance to Oliver Mtukuzi songs, right? Yeah, but she also has other things that you may like. She admires Ambassador Priscilla, who is the ambassador to Sweden from Zimbabwe. She says this lady is the one who brought about the women movement in Zimbabwe. She works very hard to ensure that that space is protected and it is promoted. So that's one of her mentors. I'm right, Patricia? Good. And then I want to invite Maurice Tabwaya, who is the coordinator for gender and youth at the East African Commission. He ran away from me. I tried to look for him so that first I can even get his photo, but also know what he likes. So I'll make sure that in his first 2 seconds, he'll tell us what he likes. And then we have Rumbizai. This lady told me, let's get the numbers first. We'll check the quality later. You know that thing where we keep being told, oh, if you're pushing for women, make sure they're women for quality. And she tells me, who checks the quality of men who get to parliament? Let's get our numbers first. So I agreed. I am a converted champion, a converted advocate that first let's get the numbers right. We will check the quality later. So we welcome Rumbi. And the last one is Mr. Kabangu Emmanuel from the DRC. He is coming. He's on his way. And when he comes, I'll introduce him better. So this session, we are going to be speaking about a model, gendered electoral law, which is developed to support women in political participation. And we are looking at what can work And we are also looking at what are the barriers and opportunities for this model law. And one of the things that I was asking myself was, some people are saying it will take us 238 years. Yeah. Some, I saw the UN Women saying 130 years. But I'm thinking all that can be a myth. Because the people who need to make that change are here in this room. They're not even outside, they're here in this room. And we can have gendered laws that can make these years become 3 or even few months, and the women can afford gender equality. And I think at this point, I want to invite Patricia to give us a summary of what the gendered electoral law looks like. And then thereafter, we'll have the other panelists comment on the same. So please, a round of applause for my panelists. Thank you, Patricia.
Okay, so Women in Law in Southern Africa is a women's rights organization in Southern Africa. It's a sub-regional network of women's rights organization that challenge discriminatory laws and policies that impede women's participation in all the sectors. So we're looking at political, social, cultural, and economic. So in this consortium under International IDEA, WILSA developed the Pan-African Model Gendered Electoral Law after having looked at the barriers that were impeding women's participation to be elected in political decision-making spaces. So we found that countries are at different levels in terms of their legislation, even in terms of their constitutions. So from that point of view, we developed the model law. So I'll take you briefly. It's a big document. It's on our website, WILSA website. I've also shared with International IDEA. They can give you copies. So I'd like to just start by, for the purposes of those that are not really cognizant of what a model law is, that this is just a set of legal standards on a specific issue which are offered for consideration and adoption by national legislators as part of their national law. So it typically embodies a detailed set of provisions which are inspired by international, regional, or sub-regional standards on a topic. So the model law serves as a reference or a sample law that can be used by national governments. Model laws are therefore not developed with a specific country in mind, but rather as an overarching template that could be applied by different countries. In that regard, the Gendered Pan-African Model Law is a holistic and comprehensive framework that goes beyond elections as an event. It covers the full electoral cycle, providing a multi-sectorial approach for prevention, protection, and mitigation of the effects of receding compliance with regulation on the enhancement of women's political participation within electoral standards. Moving on. So I think the objectives, I've actually spoken to them, but specifically, we want to make sure that the model law becomes a tool that member states can use to enact their own national laws, and it aims to, one, consolidate electoral democracy through creating gendered normative standards to regulate the conduct of the electoral processes. We also want to mainstream gender into the electoral obligations for states that are scattered in various electoral instruments, such as the SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections and the benchmarks for assessing democratic elections in Southern Africa. There is the Maputo Protocol. At international level, there's CEDAW. There are a lot of instruments. So this was meant to put together and electoral practices and processes to advance electoral democracy. So the model law accordingly aims to consolidate electoral democracy in Africa through creating a unified body of law towards a justiciable normative framework of civil and political rights that buttress the role of women in politics. So I will not belabor the point and define the definitions, but obviously there are definitions that are key in the model law. And then the sections that we dealt with in the model law, there are preliminary provisions, we have principles on elections, we have the Electoral Management Body, which is the key institution in the democratization of elections. Then we are going to look at electoral systems, delimitation of boundaries, and then we also have a section on timing of elections, political parties and electoral candidates, eligibility of voters, voter registration and the voters' role, voter education and civic education. This is very comprehensive. And we are also going to look at campaigning as it pertains to the gendered aspects, the media, election observation and monitoring, polling stations, the polling itself, even vote counting, tallying, and announcements of results, electoral disputes, and then a section on miscellaneous. Because we are saying throughout the whole cycle, everything that happens within elections needs to be gendered. Also here, we're just looking at the preliminary provisions, which covers the objectives and the key gender definitions. Again, we're trying to buttress the critical issues that need to be explained. But I'll start from this one, where now we're looking at the actual principles that we have offered in the model law. And principles on elections, we are saying they should be based on the human rights approach. And what are these key requirements when you look at it from women's political participation perspective? We are looking at equality and non-discrimination, equal participation, human dignity, security of the person, freedom from torture, freedom from inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment, access to information, freedom of expression and assembly. And also we are saying prohibition of marginalization of women through violence, intimidation, fraud. Temporary special measures, therefore, must accelerate the participation of women to underpin participation as a principle through the following principles of transparency, impartiality, integrity, and regular democratic elections. Then we were saying we're looking at constitutional frameworks in the different member states, and we are saying gender provisions in these constitutions must be a must. The states shall constitutionally entrench the principle of gender equality in political, economic, social, and cultural spheres. And then there's also another topical issue around elections in nationality. So nationality in the constitutions must ensure that rights provided in the legislation determine that citizenship of an individual can be based on either of the parent, to say either a mother or a father can give citizenship to an individual. Then access to public spaces. The state shall guarantee the supremacy of women's participation, of women's political rights over the negative and cultural practices that impede their political participation. And we say, looking at the constitutions, the helicopter analysis, we saw that some constitutions that have the best practices are Uganda, Morocco, Rwanda, Kenya, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Bolivia, Belgium, Ecuador, Colombia, and Canada. And then the third part of the model law is addressing the electoral management bodies, the EMBs. And we are saying EMBs, as a matter of principle, shall be independent and impartial and subject only to the Constitution. The election management body shall observe gender equality in employing persons, measures to be taken to maintain a permanent gender balanced professional staff. I'm sure we heard from the previous panel. And then we want to look at what are some of the strategies that should be employed by these electoral management bodies in terms of addressing gender-based violence during electoral cycle and even gender stereotypes. So we say to achieve this, some of the good practices will be developing internal gender policies, strategy. Model EMB gender policies may include commitments towards the following. So not limited, but some of the policies that EMBs can develop or adopt will include training on gender and inclusion in annual plans and programs, resources and budget lines for gender mainstreaming gender in the workplace, code of conduct and performance reviews, gender responsive monitoring and evaluation, research and knowledge production, capacity building and institutional strengthening, workplace facilities and infrastructure, mainstreaming gender in voter education, gender and inclusion in engagements with external players such as political parties, the media, CSOs, traditional leaders, and persons living with disabilities. So persons with disabilities, sorry, I beg to correct that. The correct way is, I think, persons with disabilities. Developing gender-sensitive logistics and security plans, model gender-sensitive security and logistics plans may include the following. Obligation of the election management body to review political party lists to ensure compliance with gender provisions. And again, this then also depends from country to country, because if the EMBs do not have these powers within their own laws, then this becomes also problematic, as we have noted and seen in the outcome of the elections across Africa. Then part 4, we are looking at the electoral systems themselves. And I think I don't want to belabor the point, but in the model law, we are also advocating that they need to be gender responsive electoral systems. And a gender responsive electoral system is one that does not give women a lot of challenges in terms of competing with male candidates. But we have noted that across the different countries, men are more likely to be nominated as candidates in the first past the post systems, where only one seat is available and the winner takes it all. This is a very competitive electoral model which arises in political violence, voter buying, and all those other issues that then discriminate against women's participation. And, countries that are the lowest in terms of women's numbers in political decision making, like Nigeria, Botswana, they only use this type of electoral system. Then lists that are submitted by political parties in the proportional representation systems are more likely to include women, as they need to appeal to the broader representation. So I think we see the examples: Rwanda, South Africa, Namibia, all those that have an element of proportional representation are faring much better. Then proportional representation systems are more conducive to the election of women and the effective application of gender quotas, because in such systems, political parties are responsible for the campaigning costs. And then in chapter 5, we're dealing with the delimitation of electoral boundaries. And in this one, we propose that the delimitation shall draw the boundaries of constituencies in a fair manner, applying a stipulated formula prescribed by legislation, taking into consideration population size and geographical consideration, such as location and accessibility. Just giving a small and quick example, when what we saw in the Zimbabwean election, when the ZEC delimited constituencies, because this is about gender, it's not a component, but you'd find that the delimitation actually then disadvantaged a lot of women, because their constituencies were then changed. So they no longer had a constituency, and already women are struggling to get constituencies in the first past the post. So this is an important element in terms of the delimitation processes, how they are done in terms of actually allowing women's participation. I think Gender Links mentioned an example of Lesotho, where there are women-only delimited constituencies, which is a good practice that we also feel can actually enhance women's participation. So I'll move on to the next slide. But this one, in terms of timing of elections, I think this is very clear that elections shall be conducted periodically and at regular intervals. Such intervals, as well as any variations, shall be clearly set out in the electoral law or the constitution of the country. The constitution or an electoral law shall stipulate the time in the form of specified dates within elections will be held, and the electoral stakeholders must be adequately prepared and participate in electoral processes. This is also an issue around women's participation. As you know, that women don't really have resources and they're poorly prepared to participate in elections if this is not done properly. You know, all the politics around the funding of election, etc. Then the election schedule, including all stages of election events, should be a subject of consultation with all election stakeholders, particularly taking into account the marginalized, the women, the youth, so that people do get the information well on time and adequately prepare. Then we are looking at where we are looking at political parties and election candidates. So every citizen shall have the right to form and run a political party, and all parties shall be encouraged to ensure equal gender representation and participation as candidates in elections. I think we all know that political parties are the gatekeepers in ensuring women's ability to be elected in positions. Therefore, this is a very critical section. And it's very contentious because in different countries there are different methods of looking at how political parties go about their internal political party processes. For example, in Zimbabwe, political parties are not registered, and this is a very interesting issue for the reasons that they do not want to be registered. But we know that in Kenya, political parties are registered. So we want to see how we can actually push and advocate for the registration of political parties to ensure and protect women's participation in candidature. Then restrictions on candidate eligibility shall not be based on religion, creed, gender, ethnicity, race, sexual orientation, marital status, or physical disability. The right to stand as a candidate in an election shall be on free and equal grounds. You know, free politics is very monetized. And for you to stand as a candidate in different countries, you know, there is need for you to pay certain levels of amount for nomination fees. So this then creates, again, that barrier that we are talking about in terms of women's ability to raise those funds that are needed. For example, in Zimbabwe, for one to become a member of parliament in the last election, you needed $1,000. I actually don't have that kind of money myself to pay to be a candidate. So looking at the ordinary woman, that is already a discriminatory barrier. Then nomination fees to stand as candidate shall be reasonable and affordable so as not to unduly exclude potential. I think I've already spoken to that this needs to be looked at because it's a big issue. Then there's also need for electoral code of conducts to also be part and parcel of the framework governing elections. So the code of conduct shall place an obligation on all registered political parties, referendum committees, officials of political parties, candidates, and concerned persons to commit themselves to a number of critical values and principles in elections. That is to promote gender equality, to promote fair representation of special interest groups, to publicly condemn, avoid, and take steps to prevent violence and intimidation, including gender-based political violence, not take part in any activity that incites hatred or enmity, including amongst the different genders, to reject the use of inflammatory and abusive comments inciting violence, racial, ethnic, religious, or gender-based violence. The EMB shall establish mechanisms for the prevention, treatment, and punishment of individual or collective acts of harassment and of violence against women. So because we know that political violence is intrinsic to elections in Africa, and women do not participate fully because of political violence, there's need for member states to really take this seriously and consider actually implementing these provisions that we have set out and adopting them at whatever level to reduce or to actually eradicate electoral violence, politically motivated gender-based violence. Then we look at eligibility of voters in the law, in the model law. All persons who are citizens of the state upon attaining the prescribed age shall be eligible to vote at the time of elections. The state shall make arrangements to enable people living and working outside the country to register to vote and to vote where a country maintains diplomatic or trade missions. I think some countries, it's not really contentious or there are no arising issues, but we also see that the state shall provide for special arrangements for persons unable to vote at polling stations on election day for reasons of maybe foreign services, being maybe being disabled when you're not able to go, bedridden or hospitalized, and women who are in hospital, maybe they are pregnant. This is bringing the gender sensitivity into the categorization of the persons that ought to get the special interest voting, where they can get the postal voting or whatever method of voting that persons that are not able to present themselves at polling stations can get. Then we looked at voter registration and the voters' roll. And we propose that the state shall adopt a voter registration system that is simple, transparent, accurate, inclusive, and responsive to the local, social, economic, and political conditions of the member state. At a minimum, we are looking at the literacy levels of the different countries. We are looking at the climate, administrative infrastructure, unavailability of required documentation, political environment, geography, and communication infrastructure. We know that in Africa, about 70% of the women live in rural, marginalized areas, and their accessibility and ability to be able to register to vote is very limited. Therefore, this is a very important area where we are also proposing for voter registration to be able to be done in a way that gets to the very marginalized of people that we want to partake in electoral processes. So I think we have also just mentioned some of the voter registration regulations that we propose, that election management bodies shall develop voter registration regulations that are context specific, gender sensitive, and inclusive to address barriers that are faced by vulnerable and marginalized groups. I know I'm coming from Zimbabwe, but I want to applaud the Zimbabwe Election Management Body in the last election, because on this one, we want to give them credit, because they really did go out of their way in making sure that, voter registration material was gender sensitive. It was reaching out to even persons with disability. It was inclusive because they actually included civil society. We did take part in coming together with some of the messaging and materials that was appropriate even for the youth and young people. Then the regulation development process shall be guided by gender and inclusion analysis of the barriers that are faced by vulnerable and marginalized groups. So at a minimum, the regulations shall address the following barriers: citizenship requirements for registration, lack of documentation required for registration, and this affects a lot of women in Africa. For us, we have seen that this one is the very key one. We need to make sure that the requirements are not so heavy as to exclude women who really don't have documentation, like proof of residence, and some of those other things that are required. Then lack of access to information, low literacy level, language barriers, religious barriers, ethnic or cultural reasons that conflict with voter registration requirements. So the EMB shall adopt use of temporary special measures to ensure the participation of vulnerable and marginalized groups in the voter registration process. Again, there are many examples from different countries. You hear some saying, voter registration is going to be expanded. There's going to be mobile voter registration. All those steps that should be taken must really be taken, but they must have provisions within the framework so that they are part and parcel of the laws. Then we look at voter and civic education. The EMB shall provide gender-sensitive training for all entities that conduct civic and voter education. This is very critical because, there's a lot of voter apathy, especially amongst the youth, the young people, maybe persons with disability. So we need to ensure that all civic and voter education that is carried out shall be gender sensitive. And at a minimum, we're looking at these following requirements: the dissemination of information that is contextual and addresses the needs of women and men in the target communities, conducting civic and voter education that is targeted at marginalized and vulnerable women, such as rural, illiterate, poor women with disabilities, ensuring the equal representation of women and men in entities that conduct civic and voter education, ensuring that the selected medium of information sharing is accessible to women. Then gender-based segregation of data. I think Gender Links emphasized this point, that it is important for EMBs to be able to collect gender disaggregated data and also to disseminate gender disaggregated data for purposes of analyzing elections, for purposes of lobbying, and actually using information adequately. Then campaigning. Candidates shall be offered equal, unhindered, and unimpeded freedom and access to any parts of the ward, constituency, or country where they wish to campaign during the prescribed campaign period, including outside the country. Campaign finance regulations should be stipulated. I think that needs to be taken account, and different countries need to make sure that within the confines of the law within their own countries, they adequately provide for financing, especially for women and youth candidates. Then the media, which plays a very critical role in dissemination influence, in disseminating information, creating perceptions about a candidate. We also want to ensure that the EMB provides capacity building to marginalized and vulnerable candidates on the use of media during the electoral processes. If there are media commissions and other state institutions, they must be mandated to carry out their mandate to assist the election management bodies. Public media shall develop special temporary measures during the electoral cycle period to afford female candidates free additional time for campaigning. And we've said that the best practice, maybe you can also go and have a look at how Ethiopia has managed to do that. Then model gender regulations for the media. The amount of time slots that are provided to political parties and candidates shall be jointly decided by regulators and political party candidates. The order of appearance of candidates on media platforms shall ensure balanced representation of male and female candidates through alternating between the sexes. The choice of timing for broadcasting electoral candidates shall be conducive for all genders and social groupings. You see how we continue to make sure that women are not left behind in terms of getting information and in terms of candidates themselves being able to appeal to the voters to vote for them, because you might be given slots where there's nobody who is even looking or watching TVs or listening to the radio. Then the choice of the media for broadcasting shall be based on an analysis of the needs and capacities of both genders and all social groups. And we are saying Senegal, my brother from Senegal is here. We've heard about how well they are doing in terms of this aspect. So that's a good model. Then election observation and monitoring. Obviously, election observers and monitors must abide by the laws of a country where they come in to monitor or to observe elections. So in terms of the principles, we are saying there's need to respect the laws of the host government, and they shall abide and be guided by the principles of impartiality, neutrality, comprehensiveness, transparency, inclusiveness, and objectivity, and shall respect the sovereignty, cultural, and customary practices of the country. Then gender-sensitive constitution of observer mission teams. So there can also be a model, gender model law provisions for election observation and monitoring. This is just to also make sure that it's balanced and there's equal participation of women and men. Then we also deal with polling station in the model law, in terms of the number of the polling stations and their locations. So in terms of accessibility, the election management body shall ensure that polling stations and voting booths are accessible to all, including persons with disabilities, the elderly, women and children. I think on this one, most countries are doing very well on this one. Need to say. Then the EMB shall ensure that all polling stations have gender sensitive and inclusive facilities at a minimum. These shall be some of the things that we would want to see. Separate voting booths for women only, separate toilets for women only, then for men on their own, special facilities for women with children, to change women, you need to have special facilities to change babies, special facilities for persons with disabilities in the diversity of the disability sector. Then for polling itself, there are regulations for gender sensitive and inclusive polling. So again, the election management body shall develop regulations for gender sensitive and inclusive polling. And at a minimum, these entail ensuring gender parity in all polling station personnel, women only queues and priority queues for voters with special needs, such as pregnant women, women with disabilities, elderly women, parents with young children, and other social groups with special needs. Targeted interventions for voters with low literacy levels, such as layout, design, content, and flexibility to allow for second chance voting for voters that mistakenly spoil their ballots. Prohibition of proxy and family voting. This one is very contentious. Provision for absentee, transfer, and special voting. Again, another one in terms of credibility and transparency of elections. Provision for transport and security mechanism for female staff. Provision for mobile polling. Development of mechanisms and systems to collate and report on sex disaggregated data. As we are coming to the end, I think we also looked at vote counting, tallying, announcements of results. And the principle that we are setting is that there's need to preserve the integrity of the ballot. I think through making sure that mechanisms are put in place that give confidence to the electorate in terms of how it is done. And this should also include aspects of gender sensitivity in the announcements and in the counting and in all of those processes that are related with this process. Then on electoral disputes and the dispute resolution mechanisms, we advocate that the Constitution, electoral laws, and other applicable legislation shall provide a framework for the prevention, management, and peaceful resolution of election-related disputes. So, number one, the EMB shall ensure the use of both formal and informal dispute resolution mechanisms. The EMB shall ensure the use of temporary special measures to create women-only platforms to receive complaints from women. I think this also is a key one, looking at how this is a sensitive matter and the involvement of different players in the election cycle. So there's need to create all these gender sensitive dispute resolution mechanisms. The EMB shall ensure that the adopted dispute resolution mechanisms are simple and clear and inclusive, because this is the reason why women do not report when presented with different issues or violations of the electoral election processes. An electoral court and all other courts to hear and determine electoral disputes shall prioritize and treat matters relating to violence against women and gender-based violence with urgency. Sometimes you hear that the matters then are concluded way after the election is concluded, and so they are overtaken by events and they are of no consequence and they continue to present challenges for women. Electoral courts, through the development of court rules and procedure, be gender sensitive in handling cases involving women. And we said best practice Kenya. And then now, I think when we're looking at miscellaneous, yes, this was a very comprehensive model, and I didn't want to miss any of the parts, but I'm coming to the end. This is actually the last part where there are just gender considerations in terms of now the reporting on the elections that have been held, because we saw that in the past, elections, when they were being reported, because of the lack of the disaggregated gender data, it wouldn't really specify in terms of women's participation, and you'd have to really put a lot of effort, invest in a lot of effort to analyze the information from the EMBs to be able to get the gender disaggregated data. So the reports on elections should include a gender analysis which addresses these issues at a minimum. Gender analysis of policy and legislative framework, assessment of compliance with policy and legislative framework, judicial interpretation of the gender equality and women's participation, enforcement of gender equality and women's participation, then analyzing institutional framework on gender equality and women's participation, gender analysis of the election results, experiences of women in electoral processes, and make recommendations. Then translation into local languages so that this report is actually a tool that can be adopted and used by everyone and is inclusive. So at this point, I want to say I've come to the end. Thank you very much for indulging me.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Please let's clap for her again. I think she's really taken us through a summary of what a comprehensive process would be before elections, during elections, and post-election, but in a gender responsive with a gender lens. I liked so much about how she started by saying a model law is not supposed to be exact operating for each country, but something for each country to refer to and see what you can pick from there, what can work for your country and what does not work. Then you also can find other systems. So Patricia, and on behalf of Wilsa, thank you very much for this model law. I hope everybody has a copy of the same. You've seen it, how it looks like. Okay, I'll not ask anyone to raise their hands up, but there you go. We might look at the list of participants we have and just send it. I have read it myself. It's very interesting. If we did that, those 200 years we are talking about and 130 years will be a myth. So will be? Yeah, the years are scary, but I'm not. I think if we do the right thing, we will get there. It might not be those many years. So give me the opportunity now to welcome Mr. Kabangu Emmanuel. He is the assistant of the executive director of the Independent National Election Commission of the Democratic Republic of Congo. He tells me he loves football. And Messi is his idol in football. But he thinks he can dribble better than Messi. You guys, who has a ball? We try this at around in the evening, after this. But at the same time, he's really passionate about gender mainstreaming for electoral processes. And he says he will share with us what they did in 2023 December elections in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So, bienvenue, Emmanuel. Allez-y. Thank you.
Bonjour tout le monde.
Bonjour.
Je vais être très concis pour ne pas prendre beaucoup plus de temps. Sur ce qui est de la République démocratique du Congo par rapport au processus électoral de décembre 2023, la participation de la femme...
Maybe just wait for 1 minute. I see people looking for their hearing,
okay.
including me.
D'accord.
Mine was taken by my big sister here. Okay. And I think it's channel 1. Yes, channel 1. Okay. So we can get our... Yes. And start. Okay.
Donc, voilà, comme je disais tout à l'heure, sur ce qui est de la République démocratique du Congo par rapport au processus électoral de décembre 2023, la participation de la femme s'est fait remarquer aux différentes opérations, notamment l'opération de l'identification et l'enrôlement des électeurs et électrices, sensibilisation de la population, formation, recrutement des agents, déploiement. Pour cette opération, les femmes, les jeunes, les personnes vivant avec handicap y ont pris part à hauteur d'au moins 25% pour faire respecter la question du genre. Pour la tenue des différents cadres de concertation comme mécanisme d'interaction entre la CENI, qui est notre OGE, et les parties prenantes au processus électoral, les femmes étaient invitées spécifiquement à chaque opération électorale. Pour ce qui est de l'opération de vote, les femmes ont été parties prenantes comme sensibilisatrices, électrices, observatrices, témoins et agents électoraux, dans le respect de genre, car tout appel au recrutement mentionné la candidature féminine est encouragé. Cette politique genre de notre OGE, qui est la CENI, sur la promotion de la participation accrue de la femme, repose sur le cadre juridique qui est composé des lois, la Constitution de la République en son article 14, qui dispose de la participation égalitaire et lutte contre les violences à l'égard des femmes. En ce qui concerne la loi organique qui, avant d'être adoptée, passe par l'Assemblée nationale, nous constaterons que sur ce qui est de la question du genre, plusieurs lois ont été adoptées pour faire respecter cette égalité entre l'homme et la femme. Nous avons sur ces lois organiques, notamment la loi électorale dans son article 13, qui stipule de la participation favorisée par les partis politiques qui doivent aligner les femmes et les hommes. Et sur ce fait, nous constatons que cette loi dispose d'une sanction positive. En cas de la présentation de la liste égalitaire, les partis politiques sont exemptés du paiement de la caution. Mais pour ne parler que de ce cas pendant la réception des candidatures, plusieurs partis politiques se sont obstinés à se soumettre à cette loi et ont accepté de payer tout ce qui est caution. Et par-dessus tout, il y a eu ce problème du financement de la femme qui doit être mise en application, car sur terrain, ce sont les hommes qui, depuis des décennies, sont acteurs sur la scène politique et font usage des moyens financiers qui créent cette barrière, même si l'on demandait aux femmes de voter femmes, afin que l'équilibre soit remarquable. En conclusion, le cadre juridique et autres mesures de promotion du genre par la CENI, les femmes ne sont pas suffisamment représentées. La proposition des mesures des quotas progressives demeure l'une des solutions à côté de celle de l'intensification de la sensibilisation des femmes et hommes sur le genre. Pourquoi ne pas aller plus loin sur ce qui est de la cooptation des femmes pour l'obtention des sièges au sein du Parlement, comme en bénéficient certains chefs coutumiers qui ne sont soumis à aucun vote des électeurs pour ce dernier. Le renforcement du pouvoir économique de la femme et le plaidoyer auprès des partis politiques pour la prise en compte des femmes dans les instances de prise de décision. Je vous remercie.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. You know, with translation, you wait until the last sentence is made, right? Or was I the only one waiting? All of us, eh? Okay, so just in case you thought I took time to clap for you, it's because I was still waiting. So let's clap for him again. He's talked about an Article 13 in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where he talks about how it gives a monetary incentive that if you comply, then at least you can be exempted from paying. I think that's what I heard, right? Isn't that a good practice that we can live with here? I think if most political parties were also given such kind of incentives to reduce on their costing, it would really help. And I also got excited about their work on sensitizing women, sensitization of women. I think the other day I was sharing with all of us, not all of us, but the ones who were in the Tuesday meeting, where I know there's this narrative that is also coming up that we are tired of capacity building. And I was saying there's an American scholar, I've just forgotten the name, who says we must be able to learn and learn and relearn. Learning never stops. And our capacity never stops to be improved. I know sometimes it's a communication for something else to say we need something else, but in terms of building our capacity, he's still talking about sensitizing more women. More younger women are coming up. More young emerging leaders are coming up. So we can never stop sensitization and building our capacity, learning, relearning, and learning something new. For the last 3 days I've been here, I've learned something new. So I think I support that sensitization and building the capacity of women is a good thing we can also take from DRC. So I will move to my other brother, who is Maurice. Maurice comes from the department or the coordination wing of gender and youth at the East African Community. Karibu.
Yes, thank you so much. And I'm Maurice Tayebwa, just so disregard the name you read there. I'm Tayebwa and I'm from the East African Community, the Secretariat. Again, not the commission, as many times we are called, because we are not a commission, and that matters in the subsequent discussions I'm going to have. Because as a secretariat, our role is to coordinate what our countries, partner states have agreed and are doing at national level. So we coordinate regionally. And for me, I will speak to the document that was discussed in terms of its strength, the weakness I've seen in it, and also it's just a SWOT analysis. So in terms of the strength, it is a comprehensive document, and it really guides. And we have a member of the East African Legislative Assembly in the room. Probably in her session, she will give more clarification. In the ESC, we don't have model laws. We have a parliament which makes regional laws. And the regional laws can act in different ways. In some instances, they may override existing national laws. In other instances, they may complement the already existing laws. Then in other instances, if such a law does not exist in that country, it becomes the law. So once you get guidelines like this, I think for us it is a very good it is a very good resource to basically benchmark on and develop laws within the ESC. But one challenge that we see in the development of laws in the ESC is that laws do not come in isolation. Laws actually should implement or give the legal backing to existing policies. So when policies are not existing in the countries, sometimes the countries are hesitant to pass these laws. So the East African Legislative Assembly can pass laws, but when it comes to assent and advisory opinion from the policymakers, then these laws take long to be passed because they don't have policies. So one other thing that such laws, even model laws, need to look at, they need to look at the existing policy framework within the countries and if such a law can be operational in those countries. Then the other challenge and really the threat is that some of these laws are paradigm shifts. And while we might want to say that things can change, things have not changed for a long time. And that's why the UN projects so many years, because they have been in this ever since the whole movement started, even just from 1995, very little has changed. So, and we don't see anything changing, apart from the other day when the Gen Zs decided to demand for a paradigm shift. The rest has just been the same. In fact, for me, growing up, I thought that the system is actually very rigged, that we are all part of it, especially in the political space, because we don't hold each other accountable. So such a law will have a lot of opposition from people who are already in power, people who hold the power, the patriarchal and misogynistic forces. And that's what we see. We have gender laws that have not seen light of the day, because while you have good intention, there is a lot of backlash, and this backlash comes from people with power. So when you pass such a law that is going to change the political narrative, you need to really understand the landscape. Then we've seen the issue of tokenism. Gender in itself, in my feeling, it's hugely tokenistic. I'm going to give an example of the Democratic Republic of Congo. In the recent concluded election, we've just finished an intergenerational dialogue in the ESC. We also have youth spaces in the ESC. Some of the young women who stood for election and won were not selected because there is a law that says you can only be selected if your political party has a certain quota. So no matter how you want to participate and even actually win, the system is already against you. So you can't pass that barrier. There is like a ceiling which you can't go beyond. And that's why, again, we need to do a good analysis of the different contexts of this model law. Because again, what I saw in the model law reading it is hugely skewed to the SADC region. And the SADC region, I think, has made some few advances, unlike the Eastern African region, Eastern Africa, because we also have the IGAD region, which has Somalia, South Sudan, including Ethiopia and Sudan, and we have different challenges and contexts. So if such a model law is going to be operational within the rest of Africa, it needs to look at those specific contexts within the different regions and within the different countries. Then lastly, and back to tokenism, it is the whole understanding of gender. Right now, there is an election going on in Rwanda. There is an election observation mission, but I'm here. My other boss is in office. So definitely, in the whole election observation mission, there is no gender representation. I tried to ask and say, so within the countries, are the gender ministries involved? No. And you wonder, so who will do this gender analysis? And at what point do we do the gender analysis? As we've seen, the election cycle, you should start doing the gender analysis when the election ends for the next election. And when we do any gender analysis, we usually do of the electioneering period, of the campaigning period, not of what happens before, what happens after. So the whole nuance of what gender analysis expertise means, sometimes from a gender perspective, I feel that we are underlooked. It's like anyone can do gender, and that's not true. Gender analysis has specific expertise, we have specific indicators, which we need to look into when even we develop these laws. So as we go on, we shall maybe look at the solutions for these challenges. But for now, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Please, a better round of applause. Let's clap for him again. He's ended at a very good place where he says, let's just not make gender like anybody can speak about it. Sometimes, even amongst ourselves, we make some comments that just tell us we are not in that league yet. And it always reminds me of one of my professors who says that is why it's a whole degree. in a university, just like any other degrees. You take time to learn, go through the process, and not have like a loose understanding of the same. But I like also where you started from by saying models can be used for enactment or revision. So in case you already have some laws in the East African legislation, that doesn't mean that today we can't take what Patricia has presented and go and enrich that legislation. So in as much as probably we don't refer to model laws, but if we have one, it can change, revise, or build on it. So thank you very much, Maurice. I'll now give my big sister, Rumbi, who promises me in 5 minutes, because Michael keeps on sending me texts. Oh, sorry, he didn't think I would announce. Sorry.
Thank you. I will try to be disciplined and honor that. Um, and for that reason, I really need to start on the point of acknowledging, therefore, that the model law, which was presented by Patricia and which we are acknowledging as part of the WPP project and as one of the outputs, is very comprehensive. So to keep within the time frame allocated to me, my emphasis is not so much to critique the content of it, but to say if we could look at it as a model document or roadmap for inspiration. And the honest truth is that not everything that is packaged in the model law can be rolled out or adapted in that comprehensive manner. But I want to believe that as countries, and I'm looking at my younger brother there in the corner, Kushen Kurasha, the issues about the role of parliaments. I think we need to take this forward, Kurasha, and all who are representing the regional economic communities, especially the legislative arms of the regional economic communities, so that they are aware of the contents. But more so, how can we use this model law even as a benchmarking when election observations are being conducted? Some elements of it, not everything of it, but some elements of it, they can even be used as a checklist for gender mainstreaming in electoral processes in order to check to what extent electoral processes are being managed and administered in a gender responsive way. And I also want to believe that the model law should not be seen as a standalone output, but how is it going to influence the day-to-day operations of what I keep saying are entities or institutions that are supposed to support democracy building. So even political parties, how do we create awareness and understanding of such kind of, benchmarking frameworks within political parties? To what extent are they aware of them? To what extent are we engaging national gender machineries also, to say these are the proposals that are coming out through projects such as the WPP? In a number of countries, at least in some countries in Africa, and I honestly, in the country where we are right now, we have gender commissions, gender equality commissions. To what extent as well are we making sure that such benchmarks of in the type of the model law are available and they know about them? But in everything that has been presented in terms of the content of the law, I really want to applaud the colleagues who worked on this. It's substantive, it's very comprehensive, and I know as part of our work on advocacy, we might not get everything, but some of the elements can be easily adapted. Even if they are not necessarily turned into law, they can just be good practices and behaviors, intentional with the political will. They can actually be done without necessarily waiting that we want to see something that says Parliamentary Act 0.110 of 2024. They are moral and value-based principles which we need to live by on a day-to-day basis before we even think about having them encapsulated or stipulated in a particular legislative framework. So I'll stop here, and I hope we can draw lessons to move forward in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And guess what? I will use my reflection of your presentation as my closing remark, because you said quite some inspirational words. But I want to just give a minute for anyone who has a question before I take my last round of questions from the panel. Yes. You know, when you're called my young brother, you have to say something, right?
Yes.
Okay, young brother, let's proceed.
Thank you very much. I was intrigued by from the presentation by Patricia when she talked about proxy voting, and she said, I know this is controversial. One of the conversations we will need to have is really whether, in terms of the law and practice, our elections are actually centered on citizens. I observed the 2014 Swedish elections. One of the things that shocked me are the amounts of opportunities available for citizens to be able to vote. You can do postal voting, you can do early voting, you can do special voting, you can do proxy voting. When you look at what we have been doing and even calling best practice, polling station-based voting, ward-based voting, for an ordinary person on a given day of elections, vis-a-vis the daily activities of a common village woman, she goes to the queue and finds the queue very long. And she can only vote, maybe she stays at the marginal end of the ward, where there is a closer polling station in the next ward. But because she belongs in this ward geographically, she would still have to go and I say, but the issue is, it was cost. So in the end, there's a lot of deconstruction that really needs to happen in terms of our current electoral framework, because majority of it is done with not with the end users in mind. In particular, women who are in situations that would not allow them the luxury that you are prescribing through the law and through the practice. And for me, this is where I say, physician, heal thyself. Even the election management bodies, there is also a level of awareness, which is what Rumbi was talking about. That mindset shift before you even talk about what the law says. What is the demonstration or the posture in terms of commitment on the things that you can do? I found it, I made a discovery, and I thought, let me just share. I know that I don't have a lot of time, but it's a quick one. I can assure you, moderate. I found out in section 157 of the Zimbabwean Constitution on electoral law, subsection 4. Listen to this. No amendments may be made to the electoral law or to any subsidiary legislation made under the law unless the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission has been consulted and any recommendations made by the Commission have been duly considered. When I look at this, I was actually saying, this is co-legislating mandate. It's not just Parliament. The Electoral Commission possibly has even a validating. First of all, they can take initiative. And secondly, they can actually, the law can be invalidated to the extent of non-consultation with the Electoral Commission. And that's what we need to flag. And that is the opportunity for accountability, even for the Electoral Commission to say, to what extent have they utilized this, and what impediments have they encountered when they've engaged Parliament? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I think that's the challenge we were discussing yesterday. that sometimes you go beyond the law and just do what works for the people, for the end years. Okay, we have Dr. Salu.
Beaucoup, chers collègues. Moi, je voulais juste insister à propos de la présentation de la loi modèle de Patricia, dont on parlait Patricia tout à l'heure. Je trouve le modèle très intéressant. Je voulais juste, en partant de l'expérience du Sénégal, aussi faire quelques suggestions. Et justement, les suggestions qui partent de cette expérience, parce qu'on a une loi qui a été votée en 2010, une loi qui permet effectivement d'avoir justement une part assez importante de femmes à l'Assemblée nationale, autour de plus de 40%. Donc, c'est très intéressant. Par contre, la loi, peut-être votée de manière très précipitée, n'a pas pris le soin de préciser au niveau local et à l'intérieur même de l'Assemblée nationale des dispositions qui pourraient permettre réellement aux femmes d'avoir accès aux instances de pouvoir dans ces assemblées. Je m'explique, à l'Assemblée nationale, par exemple, je peux donner des exemples très concrets. Sur 14 commissions, 2 seules sont dirigées par des femmes. Alors, le bureau de l'Assemblée nationale est aussi contrôlé par des hommes. Au niveau local, on a beaucoup de femmes qui sont membres des assemblées locales, mais seulement 3% de femmes maires, ce qui est ce qui ne permet pas justement une pleine participation des femmes et une réelle égalité. Donc, il peut y avoir des dispositions, mais éviter aussi des dispositions en trompe-l'œil qui permettent une présence des femmes, mais une présence qui ne permet pas véritablement d'avoir accès, d'exercer le pouvoir, surtout au niveau local. Ça, je pense que c'est assez important d'y penser également. Le deuxième aspect, c'est aussi l'aspect qui est lié aux partis politiques. On a fait une étude à l'IFAN avec notre laboratoire qui analyse justement les dispositions légaux, institutionnels des partis politiques. Malgré l'existence d'une loi sur la parité qui les engage de toute façon, il n'y a pas une disposition dans les statuts, les règlements intérieurs, les procédures de désignation de candidats au sein des partis politiques qui fait référence à la question de l'inclusion, à la question de l'égale participation entre les hommes et les femmes. Et donc, les femmes continuent d'être dans des sections féminines des partis politiques. Et donc, les instances de gouvernance des partis politiques sont dirigées par des hommes. Ce qui fait naturellement que lors des élections, l'obligation de la loi constitue déséquilibre l'équilibre des partis politiques. Pourquoi? Parce que les partis n'arrivent pas à se conformer à cette exigence de la loi, ou en tout cas difficilement. Ce qui fait donc qu'il y a beaucoup de listes qui sont annulées, beaucoup de partis politiques qui n'arrivent pas à respecter ces dispositions en raison de ce manque d'organisation du cadre institutionnel légal qui organise les partis politiques. Donc ça, c'est deux aspects qui me semblent assez importants et qu'il faut, à mon avis, bien documenter dans ce modèle de loi. Merci.
Okay, thank you. Like I said, translation comes much later. So thank you very much. Let's give him a round of applause. And I think that is why we are here, that we can learn from experiences from other countries. And you never know, tomorrow you might be pushing for these changes in the Senegal law. So thank you very much. So I want to go for my last round of wrapping up. And I want to give each panelist 1 minute to wrap up. And this is my question now. I'm also going to put my chairperson, and he's looking at me, as part of my wrap up team. He introduced us today to his lovely family of 4 daughters, you remember? And a wife, and he said he's the marginalized in that family. You remember? So I wanted to ask him if today he was to first, I wanted to find out from him whether any of those 4 daughters want to be leaders of anything, not necessarily politics, maybe CEO. Does any of them tell you what they want to be in terms of leadership?
Yes.
What does one of them tell us? And if you don't mind, you can give us a name.
Yeah, okay. My last daughter is called Malhassan,
Mm-hmm.
Malhassan Marjan, and she wants to be a leading doctor in the country.
Uh-huh. Oh, she has something similar to my daughter. My daughter also says she wants to be the best pediatrician. I don't know what she means by that. She's only 10. So you said she's called?
Malhassan.
Yeah, Malhassan. So if tomorrow Malhassan is to be a leader in the doctors, we have the Kenya Medical Association for doctors. What would be that law that you would change so that she can actually fairly compete to be in the association? I will ask them first to answer as you think of an answer because I know I've just put you on the spot. But what would be that law, Patricia, that we would engender so that tomorrow we have more of women running for political seat? Because today we just talked about models, but one thing that we would change to make it happen. So I start with Patricia as we come 1 minute each, and then we'll finish with Mr. Marjan.
First of all, I want to thank the room in terms of giving more insights and the critiques that actually strengthen the model law. And I want to say, having worked in this field in supporting women's political participation, I believe that creating an enabling environment for women to be able to take up decision making, whether in local government or in parliament or even in cabinet, requires a multifaceted approach, and the law is only just one of the ways that we can actually create an enabling environment that allows women to participate, but it needs to be backed by other strategies, and we're doing that in the IDEA consortium, where we have other critical strategies like male engagement, we have research, we have capacity building. So there is no one way that we can tackle this issue, but I believe that we can then create that multifaceted approach and be able to move forward the agenda. Thank you.
Be like Patricia, who tells me there are many other things we can work on. I want one thing in a law, if you would change it in an electoral law, that will enable Mr. Marjan's daughter to fairly compete for elections in the next few years.
Moi, personnellement, je pense que s'il y a une chose à changer, c'est, ce serait, par exemple, lors des, tout ce qui est concours ou compétition, ok, s'il faut parler par rapport au choix de la fille du monsieur, ok, je pense que à ce niveau-là, il faut qu'il y ait une participation en fait égalitaire où il y aura du même nombre des femmes et hommes se trouvant dans, dans la scène. Je pense que il faut qu'il y ait moins de discrimination en fait, parce que nous constatons des fois que dans le choix même de la gestion ou de l'organisation de certaines compétitions, c'est plus les hommes que l'on met en exergue au lieu de plutôt mettre des femmes qui pourront faire le travail à la place. Et voilà, parce il y a sur ça qu'on peut.
Okay, thank you. He says in the next election, we should ensure it's 50-50. You present the equal numbers. And so Marjan's daughter would have a more increased chance of competing. Okay, let's take Maurice.
Yeah, I think from a regional perspective, it is just to enact the law because it's not there alone sanctions. Because accountability is a very big issue when it comes to member states, partner states abiding to the commitments they make. Because all this, if you read the ACDEC at African Union level, is provided for and countries have agreed to all this, but they don't. and no one holds them accountable. As I mentioned in the morning in the reflection, EMBs are talking about members of parliament to enact these laws. Members of parliament are part of the system, of the political system, which is already compromised. So we just work in circles. So where does the accountability come from? Maybe a supranational body, such as the REX or the AU, could be the solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Somewhat I'm gonna incline towards what Patricia said. So because I'm also very convinced that the law on its own cannot do it. So if we to talk about the law, which I know is a very ambitious kind of way of thinking, I would actually want to see electoral laws, having provisions that specify principles of gender equality and non-discrimination. If we're going to go the legal route element, saying that electoral management bodies have the mandate to manage and they administer electoral processes based on these human rights and democratic imperative principles. But assuming, as I'm seeing the body language of like, I don't desire that's a bit, I'm assuming that already, at least we are guided by the principles in the Constitution. So we say that is already there. So for me, more than the law or in addition to the law, Patricia, one of the things that I think needs to be paid particular attention to is the tackling of gender, social norms, perceptions, stereotypes, attitude, practices, beliefs, and behaviors. So it has to go multidimensional, side by side. And some of it speaks to the edge points that was mentioned earlier by the panelists that I had with my three brothers about inculcating, entrenching these values in the education system. Right now, my 5-year-old grandson, Swedish mixed everything, because you see also the background of the grandmother. He says to me, Ambuya, which is grandmother in Shona, he says to me, my body, my rules. So already the integrity of the person, the human rights thing, it's already instilled in them at that level. So our education should also include those elements of people understanding that gender equality, women's empowerment, inclusion, it's not a by the way. It's not a luxury. It's not like doing women a favor, women and girls a favor, but it's essential for the functioning of society and even an enabler of the 2030 agenda. If we at all, we're going to talk about that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, a round of applause. Let me hear from Mr. Marjan, his answer, then I wrap up.
Well,
And please, I will explain why I'm saying just give a law. I understand the social movement here of Patricia and Rumbi telling us it can't work on its own, but I just want one law that if you are to change in Kenya, will enable your daughter to effectively compete for a position in the Medical Doctors Association in Kenya.
well, okay. Let me give it a different approach because you've asked me a
Okay.
law in
Okay.
medical. I'm not.
No, in an electoral, let's use the electoral, not medical, electoral process.
Yes, yes.
Because electoral processes are the same, whether in medicine, in teaching,
Yes.
in, I don't know, marketplace, election is elections. Or what? No. Let's proceed. I need to go back with my Kenyans. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, TO without T. But what I would say is that first of all, as a person, I respect anybody's choices. I'm not say anybody. It also includes also women. Like my daughter decided that is the direction she wants to go. So what I did is basically to encourage her and to tell her that you can be able to do it. She got a chance in University of Nairobi, and she decided to also go and do interview in Aga Khan. And she says, I want Aga Khan because of these reasons. I say, fair enough. I have the resources. I will take you to Aga Khan. So I respect the choices, first of all. And therefore, when it comes to women, and to increase their chance in participation. I think I will just look at the law that provides for equal opportunity. That to me is very, very important, because if it is not there, then the women of the day will continue being at the lowest point. So this is something that we need to encourage very much. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think we've had the law of 50-50, the law of equal participation, the law that removes discrimination, because then thereafter, all these other things can now implement, because we keep on hearing, I can probably do because I don't have a framework that protects me. So if we start with the frameworks, then we can also add these others. I'm not saying it's an egg and chicken thing. I'm not saying they can't work, all of them, but if also we can have quite some firm laws, we would get the equality you're looking for. So I promised to wrap up with what you said in my reflections. You told us the roadmap, what Patricia has presented today, should be a roadmap of inspiration to wherever we are going after we leave Johannesburg. That we should use the good things that came out of that law to go and inspire our laws. You also said, let's basically spread the word. So I try to go to church. Michael knows that. And in my church, when the priest ends the mass, he says, go in peace and spread the news. So let's go in peace and spread the news. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much as they take a photo, which is a great one. But I'm just wondering, she has already released everyone to go. So I don't know whether she doesn't want us to go to the next session. Yeah. Yeah, so thank you so much. Great panelists, great moderation. And I don't think whether we need to take more time in between. I know the time is far much spent. And we are checking on, we are at 12:33. And the plan was we need to take the next session, which will be led by Vera, so that when we are breaking for lunch, we will be lighter and lighter in terms of what you're supposed to cover in the afternoon. We're already in the noon, so I pass it on to Vera.
Thank you so much, Michael. Hello. Are we in the hall? I see for some time now we have been sitting. So we will take 5 minutes of your time to do an energizer. So can I just please ask us to stand up for some few minutes, please? Yes, just relax, stand for some few minutes. I know the panelists are already getting ready. So we are going to do some kind of energizer that is about the brain. Let me start from here. So I will say a sentence and I won't finish it. You will continue with that sentence from where I stopped. So we cannot go through. So if I just say you, then if I go to him, he continues from where you stop. So we all have to be attentive. This is to take our brain to the next session. So as we prepare to put more women into politics, one of the things we should do is to change electoral laws in some countries.
Ensure that those laws are implemented in letter and in spirit.
Can you speak aloud, please? Are we all the same? Are we all in the same room? Yes, Graham. Sorry. Yeah, you pick from where he stopped.
Okay, enhance gender parity in political parties, policies, and regulations.
Although the challenges are much, as EMBs,
engage the legislature to partake the introduction of new laws that emancipate participation of women.
And as we continue to do this, we ensure that we have to work together with political parties to
we ensure that we capacitate them as well to engage women and also to accept in reality that gender balance is necessary.
and in this field, we have so many stakeholders, including our partners also have to play an important role, including
donors and international community,
and understanding that we have different languages. Accessibility is one of the most important things. Therefore, communication should be
J'ai pas entendu en fait. Oui, mais j'ai pas entendu la traduction.
mon français est mauvais. Mais ça veut dire d'abord que quand on fait quand on dit accessibilité, on fait quoi?
Ah oui, pour que ça soit effectif, je pense qu'il faut créer des lois palliatives, en fait, qui permettront à ce que les femmes ne soient pas leur permettre de participer de manière.
Okay, thank you so much. I just wanted to bring our brains back to the hall as we invite the next set of panelists to take over. So thank you so much for the exercise. Can we clap for let's go. This next session, in this next session, we are going to invite Karin, Kurasha, Hiba, and Honorable Fatuma. We are starting this session at 12:40. So we will end at 12:40, at 1:40 or after, because I'm not ready to sacrifice my time. We just go briefly into what this is. My name is Vera Murin. I am the program officer for elections with IDEA. Thank you so much, sir. This session is about electoral benchmark and obligation for inclusive democratic elections. So reviewing traction on continental and sub-regional frameworks on enhancing women's political participation. We have 4 speakers here. You have 10 minutes each to speak, and I will be indicating, I have timed it. So when it's your time, I will indicate you have stepped above it. So you have to be direct. We start with, we'll give 5 minutes at the end of our session for questions and answers and contributions. So we start first with the first question, which will be directed to Karin. I know Karin was on stage yesterday, but I would like to say this about Karin again. She is the acting head of democracy and electoral units at the African Union. So she's bringing on board over 20 years of experience, and she's going to be sharing with us what the African Union has been doing in this respect. So, Karin, what is the African Union's role on inclusive governance and democracy, and how technology can enhance the work of EMBs in fostering women's political participation in Africa? You have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Hello. Uh, Thank you, Vera, and good morning, everyone. It's okay. Let me first say that this session, and I would like to reflect a bit on the energizer that Vera just offered us before to introduce the session. I like that one because this take me to say that inclusive governance is very instrumental to nurturing and fortifying the roots of democracy. This is about specifically equitable participation and representation. And you know, within the continental body, the African Union, with its vision and rule, especially, let's say, Article 4 of the Constitutive Act, the AU adopted several instruments. Sorry, I'm getting a bit disturbed. I don't know if it's my micro. Oh, okay, thank you. So what I was saying that the African Union drove is Constitutive Act, adopted a number of instruments that we can find related to all we are discussing here, starting from the African Charter on Democracy, Election and Governance. We can also talk about the Maputo Protocol. We have the architecture of governance, architecture of peace and security, the African Charter on human and people rights. There is a lot. The same times while the organization is adopting those instruments, is also domesticating more, going beyond the continent in domesticating some of the international standards provision when we can talk about the UN Security Council 1325 provision. And we have also the Universal Human Rights Declaration. So beyond this all, let's say, thinking about asking the question, how can we respond again well on the desire of the continent? Then we said, okay, let's prioritize. And those priority, as you may know, can be found through the 7 aspirations of the Agenda 2063, which we used to call the Africa we want. Why we want it, because these are our desire. We can find ourselves those aspirations. And when you look at the aspirations, you can see by yourself that aspiration for let's say 3, 4, 6, even we can add 7 are really gender sensitive. All aspects are reflected there. And then apart from that, the AU is not limiting by, okay, we provide those things and now is enough. Then the questions came again around, is it enough to just keeping talking about woman empowerment? And then are we sure that the men also can find themselves? How to make sure to bring the men, we need them to be close to work also with us on this. And this bring the institution to come up with the idea of positive masculinity approach. Since recent years, it's about 2 years now. Annually, we are having discussions about this. So to make it practical, let me say, I want to share a story. I hope it will be interesting for you, because we, mentioned the instrument, the provision. Let's make it practical. So we are here in a story of a woman called the African Union Commission, who she's married since 1963 to 55 men. She has 55 husbands. And here the husbands are the member states. You can understand that. And with this 55 husbands, so meaning she's married since 1963, as I said, it's about 60 plus years now. She renewed that marriage on 2002 to become the African Union, you know. And then with the husband, she started to have kids in 1963. So the kids here are the citizens within the different member states. And now, in that family called the African Union, the commission, you do understand, is the woman, the wife, who is there as a secretariat, of course, to implement all the decisions taken by her husband, the 55. They used to meet annually several times. Any times they can meet within, even at the regional basis, through the Peace and Security Council to take decision. And as a wife, all here will agree with me, who is that wife will try to go against her husband? He will divorce you. I can open another bracket. When you look at across the continent, look at what is happening in some of our member states, where you can see, because due to maybe one, or let's call this sanction process, how it's going, some of them, they are explaining that they are ready even to withdraw themselves from the institutions. We don't want to mention their name, but as I said, when you go across the continent, you can understand by yourself. So let's going back to our family story. That family, the wife, the provision I just cited earlier, starting by the African Charter on Governance and Democracy, those provisions are the food cooked in the kitchen by the family to be eaten, and also different husbands and kids can digest on his own way. We can agree also on that point. And then, so now, what is this? I would like to come on the questions I've been asked to respond this morning. What is the role of that woman, that wife, to make sure that the food, the way it has been cooked in the kitchen, in the house family, together with the 55 husband, with the kids, because we assume that the provisions, when it has been put in place, crafted very well, is supposed to respond to all desire, to all needed of the entire family, right? And then how to make sure that this is going to be the role of the woman to make sure that it's digested. The response for us, it will be simple. Number one is to understand that this is going to be a collective responsibility. It's not only the wife by itself, because when she was cooking, she was not alone in the kitchen, as we can see. So then, this collective responsibility is also about to provide that collaborative platform to allow discussions, to allow dialogue, to facilitate the implementations of the provisions. And those platforms, we can find it, for instance, through the regional basis with the regional economic community. We have the EMBs here around. So at each level, everyone should play his responsibility, following the provision where we know ourselves that we contributed, we were engaged before them to be ratified or adopted in the family. Then, as I said, after providing that collaborative platform, this can provide the conducive environment to digest well, to implement, and also to make sure that in a daily basis and over the years, we can work well and everything can also facilitate, as we are talking about the women mainstreaming, or to foster women participation in politics. Now, regarding the technology, how the technology can yeah, just a quick one. How the technology can foster woman participation in politics. It's just in facilitating inclusion, because Let's say when you look at, for instance, the biometric system, as we are addressing here, we have our brothers and sister from Electoral Commission. When you have the biometric system, this is an opportunity where you can provide disaggregated data. You can allow to show how many female you register, how many male, how many youth, how many people living with disability. And when we have even how many breastfeed women. When we have those information, and when all the citizens, all the population, they are aware that through the system, we can have permanently in a regular basis those data, they will buy in easily, they will feel engaged, they will feel concerned about the process, they will know that we are really considered, and we can anytime find ourselves in all everything that it has been prepared or organized. And also this will help to build more trust on what we are doing, because it's also something very important to consider. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karine. Please, can we just give a round of applause to Karine? Yeah, thank you so much. I think the take home from your session is about the collaborative role that the African Union relies on all the member states to ensure that this is done. And also, we look forward that the African Union should also put in place monitoring and a mechanism that will hold member states responsible for domesticating all of this. So we are also looking forward to that. Our next speaker, Kurasha, I think I got the name this time right. Thank you so much. You need no introduction anymore. So what are the good practices that enhance women's political participation in Africa? You have 10 minutes to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Now that you talk about needing no introduction, I come from a constituency where they will tell you we are introducing a person who needs no introduction, and they will take the next good 20 minutes introducing the same person. I'm honored to be sharing this platform and to share a few insights in terms of the good practices. I wish to put a disclaimer, Chair, that I will naturally be biased towards the southern tip of the continent because of where I'm coming from. The good, in terms of the good practices, I have taken practices really in terms of my approach to mean procedure in terms of how we do things, and this is how I've conceived the presentation. So the first good practice I would flag is regional commitment to gender equality. When you look at the SADC region, it was one of those regions that pioneered the concept of linking gender and development, which is enshrined in the SDGs. And the link to development, I think, helps to broaden the discussion, not just to politics, but also to the national cake in terms of the resources. When we do not embrace gender equality, what do we stand to lose? What is the cost in terms of the governance credibility, in terms of the human rights aspects? And so when you then look at subsequent tools other than the SADC Protocol on Gender and Development, developed in 2008, revised in 2016, the regional blueprint, the regional indicative strategic development plan of the region, which is running until 2030, is actually unequivocal in terms of the link between gender and development. And I think that is very important, where all the member states are obliged to look at gender comprehensively. When you are looking at allocation of resources, when you're looking at developing national development plans, where is gender? Is gender cross-cutting? The second aspect, and I'll go into a bit of detail just for the benefit of colleagues, and in so doing, also indicate where avenues of engagement lie within the region. Supportive regional normative and national legislative frameworks. So what happens in the SADC region? The first election instrument was developed in 2001 by parliamentarians. So they actually pioneered even on the continent in terms of development election instrument, the norms and standards for elections. When the summit, the SADC summit, developed an instrument in 2004, one of the issues that caused disquietness was the fact that it was much narrower in terms of scope than even the one that was done by parliamentarians earlier. So that became a basis for engagement and negotiations until 2011, when it was agreed that both parliamentarians and the ministries that are in the council must engage in the review of the principles and guidelines governing democratic elections of 2004. One of the, some amongst the positives that came out of the revision, first of all, was the shift from short-term election observation to long-term election observation. In other words, integrating the election cycle approach. So this is actually at regional level. If you want to have accountability issues around an election cycle approach in the SADC region, there's basis on which you can be able to do that, because member states have already signed through the revised principles and guidelines, which were adopted by the Ministerial Council of the organ in 2015. Secondly, there also was an attempt to define some of the concepts that were thrown around loosely, such as free and fair. When you assess elections, colleagues, you know that we are assessing no less than 15 or 20 aspects, gender being one of them. When you now conclude an election as free and fair, what does that reflect? I mean, how does that link with what we are trying to expose? So the revised principles and guidelines then defined the terms that are used. And I think we ended up with 3 or 4 terms, and the beauty of it, they are defined, and therefore there is common understanding. The third issue, there was also expansion, an attempt to diversify the composition of the observer missions. Before the revised principles and guidelines, the observers were officials mostly from Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And obviously that places constraints on the resources that are available and capabilities of an observer mission. So there's an opportunity through the diversity to include even non-state actors. And for me, where the opportunity is, it's for civil society organizations to demand accountability in terms of how this is actually done in practice. I don't think we have made enough noise. The reality is that, I summarize what Rumbi said in terms of the relinquishing of power, in that the power cake is a finite cake, unfortunately. So you won't gain without someone losing. And that is the reality. Sometimes, unless you put policymakers in a position of discomfort, you are unlikely to get audience. So if they have committed in this through these instruments, is that not an opportunity for us to then hold them accountable? The third, forgive my numbering, but another aspect I wanted to highlight is also the provision that makes it mandatory for post-election evaluation. So the SADC principles and the guidelines require the SADC Electoral Advisory Council to liaise with the with EMBs to lead a process of an inclusive post-election evaluation. To what extent have we utilized that as an opportunity? So we were talking yesterday with my colleague from the African Union in terms of how we may capitalize our respective mandates, and the fact that RECs are closer to the member states in terms of maximizing our impact around issues of election engagement, including gender and women political participation. The last aspect I will highlight is also the issue of the integration of the provisions of the SADC principles, SADC protocol on gender and development. So before that, the principles and guidelines did not integrate existing obligations that are contained in such instrument as the protocol on gender and development. And I think this was very important because it ensures a coordinated approach. And the third good practice is the issue of quotas and affirmative action in terms of inclusive electoral systems. I think the barometer, the presentation of the barometer yesterday did a justice in terms of showcasing the milestones we have made in the SADC region. I'm not one to be modest about achievements, so that when we are also castigated for the failures, we take it with grace. So the SADC region is home to some of the high flyers globally in terms of gender equality. When you look at South Africa, Mozambique, and Namibia, and these are quotas, in most cases voluntary. And I think what we need to do is really to make sure that they are no longer just voluntary. The problem with the voluntarism is also sometimes associated with tokenism. Women in parliament who are holders of quota seats have confirmed that they are stereotyped and taken as a special arrangement. And that's why it's important to, when we have embraced good practices of voluntary quotas, to safeguard those through legislating for them. Then we also admit that we are also home to some of the least performers. When you look at Botswana, DRC, Eswatini, and this brings to the core the issue of the importance of electoral systems in the attainment of inclusive outcomes, including gender equality. There is evidence that, as we saw from the barometer, and SADC member states have started, particularly those that are using first past the post, started to embrace a mixed system to address issues of gender equality. Although proportionality leads in terms of the best outcomes, I think mixed member proportions have also made strides. And we could give a bit of examples around there. Shay, you wanted to address me?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you so much. Do you have another point to put across?
I do. I want to do it within your time frame. Let me know the amount of time I have, and I see what I can.
Oh no, you've exceeded your 10 minutes already.
My-
Sorry about that.
My sincere apologies. It was not
Yeah,
intentional.
but there will
change.
be an opportunity for questions and answers and discussion, which will be
Sure.
open for you,
Sure.
and you can put in this point.
Okay.
So
sure.
thank you so much, and I think you have put out best practices that we can replicate in ECOWAS, we can replicate in EAC, and it's good that they are all here to see how we can create an enabling environment for women's political participation. Not to take the time of our honorable here, who is the next speaker. Honorable, what we just want you to put across in 10 minutes is, so what has been the progress on the actualization of these existing continental and regional frameworks across different jurisdictions? We have heard of what the African Union is doing. We know international, regional, and even national instruments. So what to you has been the progress? So thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to build on what other colleagues have said on the utilization of these regional and continental frameworks. I think what is important to note is that African Union or sub-regional, our sub-region or the regional economic communities are not short of the normative frameworks. We really have more than enough. When I look at the list that Kerrin talked about, be it the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, the Maputo Protocol, the elections and governance guidelines. So there are so many. And I want to say that at the East African at the East African community level, we've tried to integrate some of these continental instruments, even in our treaty. When you look at the East African Community Treaty, which is our constitution, Article 6 of our treaty that talks about fundamental principles. 6D talks about the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, taking into consideration areas of democracy, gender equality, transparency, accountability. So across our treaty, we are also implementing the continental frameworks, but also the international instruments, including the CEDAW, the Convention on the Civil and the Civil Rights and all that, and also the declarations. Again, in our treaty, we have a fully fledged cooperation area that talks about cooperation with regional and international community. And here we also talk about UN and also the African Union. And what we are emphasizing on is the application of the various instruments that have been already established at the regional and international level. When it comes to our partner states, when you look at the constitution of most of our partner states, all of them, I think they've all adopted the Beijing platform for action, a minimum of 30% representation, I think, except maybe Kenya. But Kenya in the morning, Hussein explained, they are also on track. And I think Beijing is one area that we have to look at how successful it has been. In Rwanda, I attribute most of the achievements we've made in area of gender equality and having more women in representation in political decision making to the Beijing platform for action. That critical area that talks about power and decision making. We came up with an action plan, we came up with a strategy, and there was also synergy between the civil society and also the government and national machineries, and it worked for us. So same applies to CEDAW. Most of the member states have been reporting on CEDAW, but I think this is where African Union Commission can come in to enforce, to hold member states accountable in implementation of the rest of these good declaration, guidelines, and also protocols on good governance, democracy, but also the inclusion of women in decision making. I feel there is a missing link because, if you just depend on goodwill, nothing will take off. The second area I want to talk about is in the area of election observation. I've had an opportunity to head some election observation missions on behalf of the African Union. And I still remember the role that the first African Union woman president or chairperson, Madame Dlamini Zuma, played. I hope this has also been consistent because when she came in, she tried to ensure that there was inclusion in the deployment of the AU election observers. Initially, it used to be heads of state, former heads of state, former prime ministers, and very high level people. And of course, when you talk about former heads of state and prime ministers, how many women will you find there? Very few. There was always a gap. But when she came in, she made it really intentional to ensure that there were more women who could head observer missions. And that's why I had an opportunity also to be deployed to head missions in Namibia in 2014, presidential, and also the first ever AU Women Observer Mission in Seychelles for parliamentary election that took place in 2016. And that was a very interesting observer mission, leading only women observers. And you can imagine the excitement even the country had, Seychelles itself. And one of the reasons why this country was chosen was because by that time it had a very high number of women in parliament, second in Africa, around 45%. But that year had also been declared as a year of human rights with a special focus on women. Unfortunately, what we observed on the field is that when it came to political parties, in the constitution allows everyone, including women, to participate freely in elections, to compete. There are no legal barriers, but there are no special provision for women. For example, in Seychelles, within the constitution, for example, the quotas and special measures. And therefore, even the numbers that we had prior elections was based on the goodwill of the ruling political party. I think it was called Parti Le Peuple, which was had prioritized the issue of gender. Unfortunately, the party lost, and the current party that we have, which was the main opposition party, didn't have issues of quotas in their party system. We ended up having only 4 women out of 24 in the constituency. There were 24 constituencies, so only 4 women, and that accounts to around 16%. So you can see the fall that you had from 45 to 16%. And that goes back to the findings of the barometer that we really need to engage political parties. They are the keys, they are the gatekeepers to ensuring that we have more women participation. But of course, part of our recommendations was also to ensure that Seychelles can consider coming up with special measures, including quotas, because I don't see just leaving the situation the way it is, not only in Seychelles, but even in other partner states. It will be very difficult to level the playing field. Because again, when you look at the number of women who are heading political parties, again, we had only 1. A number of candidates out of 70, there were only 20 women candidates. But when it comes to women voters, you have over 50%. They are very busy. The electoral management, again, there was around, the number was also small. But what I wanted to say is that when it comes to the application of these continental frameworks, looking at the way African Union or even the East African Community organizes elections, we are always guided by these instruments. And partner states take both African Union and also our regional observation missions very serious, because elections is part of one's credibility. Nobody wants to come with a very bad report. So what I want to say is that we can build on that momentum. We always come up with very good recommendations, including on enhancing women participation in future elections, addressing the gaps within the electoral management bodies, and improving here and there. But the biggest challenge has been follow-up, monitoring by the relevant institutions, be it at the regional level, but also at the African Union level. So I think moving forward, we can strengthen that. And finally, is the issue of reporting. Again, what I also realized is that in most of the African Union observer missions, but also the East African partner states where we have observed, we normally come up maybe immediately after the elections, we come up with what we call preliminary statements, and these are summaries. And we normally say after 3 months, we are going to come up with comprehensive reports. And these comprehensive reports should be helping electoral management bodies and other stakeholders. But the challenge is that it takes long to get this report sent. So I think, again, in the area of reporting, these are areas that you can improve on, but ensure that we hold our partner states accountable. Because I believe if partner states can improve on implementation of the various recommendations during every election, but at the same time enforce the instruments either by domestication, ratification, and also integration in their action plans and strategies, I believe we can see change in the numbers of women, but also having an enabling environment that allows women to participate not only as voters, but also as candidates. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable. Okay, thank you so much, Honorable. I think we should give Honorable a round of applause. Thank you so much. I'm happy to know that I was not the only timekeeper, even the presenters themselves are timing. As our next presenter will give us a comparative of analysis of what is happening in the Arab region. So covering Jordan, she's from Jordan. I think this is the first time she's climbing the stage. Dr. Hiba is the director of a human rights organization in Jordan. She is gender, and gender is her. Whatever she does it from a gender perspective and a gender lens. She has been working with civil society organizations. She has been working with EMBs, political parties, and the government in the Arab region to ensure that women are equally represented at the political and decision level tables. So, Dr. Abiba, you can go.
Thank you, Vera. Ladies and gentlemen, may God bless you with a good day. Today, I'm very, very proud to be with just a wonderful group politician to whom is my hat. Today, we will be focusing on a critical pillar on a healthy democracy, women political participation in the Arab world. Imagine a society where discussion impacting everyone, everyone are made without the voices and point of views of a half the population. This is the reality for many Arab countries where women remained underappreciated in the political sphere. Why is this participation so important? A powerful democracy bloom on diversity when women who form half the population are absent from decision-making tables, a critical issue affecting their life, family, communities, like their crucial input. The good news, change is happening. While processes may seem slow, women across the Arab world are increasingly demanding their rightful place in shaping the political landscape. The crucial role of EMBs, these represent the backbone of fair and inclusive election. Today, we will explore how EMBs can become powerful enabler for women's political participation in the Arab world by using their unique position. EMB can bridge the gap and unlock the full potential of women as leaders and decision makers. Here are some key areas where EMB can make an important impact. Assist women candidates, voter registration drives, training and workshop, streamline nomination processes, promoting a level playing field, anti-discrimination policies, security marriage, media accountability, collaboration advocacy, collaboration with civil society and women, public awareness campaign promoting women's participation. Lessons learned from women's political participation in the Arab world. The journey of women political participation in the Arab world offers a valuable lesson that can guide the future efforts towards a more inclusive democracy. The power strategy, action by EMBs, effective quotas, quota system, when implemented effectively with supporting magnetism, can demonstrably increase women representation in the parliament, as seen in Jordan and Tunisia. Target voter education, reaching out to women, especially in rural areas, through voter registration drive and awareness campaign is crucial. Training and support, providing training programs and logistical support empowered women to navigate the difficulties of candidate and campaigning. The importance of collaboration, EMBs and civil society. Collaboration between EMBs and women rights organizations can foster target initiative addressing specific regional issues. Public advocacy. EMPs can play a crucial role in supporting the importance of women participation, generating broader public support. The need for ongoing efforts, shifting culture norms. Long-term public awareness campaigns are needed to challenge traditional gender roles and foster more accepting environment for women in politics, addressing financial constraints. Financial support magnetism, just as target campaign funding, can help bridge and resource gap faces by women candidates. Combating discrimination, RUPAT's anti-discrimination policies and enforcement magnetism and assess necessary to create a safe and fair political space for women. Building network and mentorship program, connecting experienced women with aspiring candidates can provide invaluable guidance and support. Networking chance, creating platforms for women to build networks within the political sphere can level the playing field. The value of drive perspective. Women's unique perspective on socially and economically and family issues enrich political discourse, and lead a more inclusive policy solution. Increase representation strengthens democracy by ensuring our voices and are heard and reflect in decision makers. These lessons highlight the importance of a multi-faces approach. Issue facing women in the Arab politics. Despite the positive efforts of EMB and growing awareness, women in the Arab politics still face many issues. Here are some key problems. Culture norms, lack of family support, financial constraints, not enough legal quotas, or carrying out magnetism, discrimination and violence, limited access to network and mentorship. These issues are complex and interconnecting. Overcoming them requires a multi-way approach include public awareness campaign, economic empowerment, capacity building programs, strengthening enforcement of quota, anti-discrimination initiative, mentorship program. By addressing this issue, we can create a more inclusive and fairer political environment where women can grow with confidence and include their voices and perception to the Arab world political landscape. While issue remain, several Arab countries showcase how EMB can demonstrably increase women political participation. Here are a few spring examples like Morocco, Jordan, Tunisia. Tunisia, following the 2011 revolution, ISIE implemented a quota system requiring parties list and to include to least 30% women candidates. This coupled with voter education campaign targeting women results in an important rise in female representation in parliament. In the 2019 election, women held a record-breaking 24.7% of parliamentary seats. Morocco, NIEC has activity promotes women participation through training programs for aspiring women candidates and collaboration with women rights group in the 2021 election. Women 12% of seats in parliament, a notable increase for previous election. Jordan, the electoral law, the political parties were admitted to include open and closed lists, and the quota percentage was increased from 15 seats to 18 seats. Also, in the political parties, women are ranked in the first, in the third, followed by the other three, and the fifth seat is a young man or woman. IEC in Jordan also took initiative just as awareness campaign that encourage women to vote. These success stories show the positive impact EMBs can have by implementing strategy, initiative, collaborating with the stakeholders, and advocating for women's political participation. EMB can pave the way for a more inclusive and representative political landscape in the Arab world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please, I think that was not enough. Can we give her, yeah, can we give her a round of applause, please? And thank you so much, Doctor, for sharing the experience from the Arab world. My timer tells me that we respected your time and we still have some peak time. So thank you so much for that good practice. I think for the past 40 minutes, we have been discussing context. We all agree in this hall that there are barriers that women are facing to participate in elections. We have all insisted on the need for us to have a level playing ground. And the AU has clearly put it out. What is there that the African Union is doing to ensure that this comes to be no longer a dream, but actually a reality? And Karine has pointed out so many instruments that the African Union has. And again, we went further to SADC, and we have seen what SADC has been doing. And Honorable told us that these instruments are many. When we keep creating instruments, we are in another way canceling other existing instruments. I think we will accept that in this room, we have so many instruments right now to ensure that women are represented at this level. And we have so many recommendations sitting at the table, sitting in our shelf, sitting in offices, sitting with civil society organization, sitting with EMBs, and nothing is being done. So we have to take this step forward. And I'll be giving the three panelists 2 minutes each to tell us. We have instruments, we have recommendations. What next? So we start with you.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. Chair, I'm hardly containing myself because I just got news that DRC today signed the agreement amending the SADC Treaty to establish the SADC Parliament. I came here working for the forum. I'm going back working for the SADC Parliament. That's a further opportunity to engage with the Parliament to be able to influence legislation and policies, both at regional and national level. Chair, I have 5 things that I think we can do in terms of the mechanisms for domestication and implementation. The first one is strengthening the national, regional, and continental linkages for awareness, for capacity building, for benchmarking, for cross-learning, and for accountability. We are in environments where resources are difficult to come by, We're in an environment where we are targeting the same role players unless we coordinate. Sometimes we are also the ones that create that fatigue amongst the national actors whom we are all targeting without coordination. So I think we really need that. Secondly, capacity building and training targeting key role players like political parties. I think this point has been made enough in terms of the huge role being given to political parties, and yet in terms of framing and positioning in terms of the law, they remain loose organizations that do not necessarily have obligations to anyone except their members. And now to have them deliver democracy in the way we conceive, it's sometimes very difficult. They are not the ones that sign the commitments. It's our states, but they are the ones that must be the means of delivery. The third one, we need to leverage reform opportunities. When you look at, we often say in reforms, a crisis presents best opportunities. We saw that with the hung outcome in South Africa. But to what extent are we mobilized to be able to step in and make those demands? If you went to the DA before they were admitted into government and say, we need these things, they may have listened to you than when they are clothed with the state authority. And that's just how it works. So sometimes we need to better coordination in terms of where are those opportunities and who can we best deploy to be able to do that. The fourth point, advocacy and awareness. I always cite the story from the Holy Book, the Bible, and I'm not at all insinuating that all the other books are not holy. I'm just using the word holy just to be dramatic. There's a story of a gentleman called Philip. He was told by the Spirit, apparently that's what the verse says, and says, go and meet the Ethiopian eunuch. And the Bible says Philip ran. And that is not where the interest is. When they met, Philip asked an exchange of question. He asked the Ethiopian eunuch, he found him reading the Bible, and he asked, do you understand what you read? Does anyone know what his response was? How can I understand unless someone explains it to me? Sometimes it is simply how the things work. We need to make sure that we take proactive action in terms of awareness and advocacy. And advocacy, from what I now know, is in terms of the capabilities. I really was moved this morning by Rumbi. If she was advocating to me, I would have given in. And lastly,